Good morning. Thank you for joining us for a panel discussion related to Capital Access Redefined, the Chamber's strategy to increase access to capital in our region, which was published on August 4th. I want to thank our entrepreneurship and small business ecosystem sponsor, Computer Systems Plus, a local IT services company. Computer Systems Plus helps small businesses streamline their communication and avoid costly downtime with managed IT services, data protection networks management, telephone and voice over IP, on-site and remote 24/7 support, and more. Founded 37 years ago by Dave Glass, the company is now led by his son, Rob. I'm going to turn it over to him to start the program.
Thank you, Nancy, and good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Glass, and I am the CEO of Computer Systems Plus. We are an IT managed service provider here in the Knoxville area, proudly serving businesses of all sizes throughout East Tennessee. For some of our clients, we are simply their complete source of IT support and related services, and for others, we are an extension of their IT team. I think it goes without saying, IT is such an important part of a growing small business ecosystem, and of course, we would be happy to discuss that further with anyone if they'd want to reach out. We are proud Knox Chamber members and a sponsor of the small business ecosystem. Quite simply, like I like to say, because no ship makes the journey alone, she requires the wind, stars, and the sea. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nadeem Jabran, Vice Chair of the Chamber's Entrepreneurship Small Business Council, which is made up of local entrepreneurs and small business executives. The council was involved in the development of Capital Access Redefined and will lead its implementation. Take it away, Nadeem.
Thank you. Yeah, we are excited. As Rob said, thank you for everyone for being here. Rob, thank you and your company's investment in the Knoxville Chamber and specifically for this priority. A lot of work's been going on. The Chamber exists to drive economic prosperity for all, to be able to obtain a sustainable economic ecosystem that fuels growth for existing industry and prepare our region for future employment opportunities. The Chamber created a 5-year strategic vision called Path to Prosperity. Thus far, 3 strategies have been created for the vision's priorities. The first, Talent Redefined. Second, Workforce Redefined, and now Capital Access Redefined. The Chamber began this process in December, and we were able to hire Richard DePaul as our consultant. And what he did was he was hired to conduct research to help develop the strategy and write the white paper. Richard is a KEC executive in residence and venture advisor for MBX Capital. For his research, Richard interviewed 145 stakeholders, including small businesses, business owners, corporations, investors, lenders, community groups, entrepreneurial services and organizations, educators, and peer communities. He's with us today and will moderate the upcoming panel discussion, which our panelists are awesome. Can't wait for you all to meet them. Each of the panelists will represent the 4 recommendations that make up the strategy. So I'd like to introduce those speakers and the panelists. The first is Jade Adams of Oglewood Avenue. Jade is an entrepreneur, small business owner, and her shop is on Oglewood Avenue in North Knoxville, on North Broadway specifically. It's a modern house plant boutique. Previously, Jade was a professional photographer, which means she still is a professional photographer. During the pandemic, she actually pivoted and started her own business, and that was in October of last year. Jade was also one of the first businesses in our 100 Knoxville 5x5 program, and she also is participating in a 2-year program with HGTV to serve as a digital host, providing houseplant care tips, which is something I could use assistance with. I actually had the honor of meeting and being inspired by Jade while being a mentor with 100 Knoxville. So thank you, Jade. Callie Archer, the recommendation, I may not have said the first one. The first recommendation, that's really important, is to increase opportunities for businesses seeking less than $50,000. That's the first recommendation. The second recommendation, which is sponsored or hosted by Callie Archer, is to expand and strengthen entrepreneurship and small business education, training, and services. And Callie is the president of Junior Achievement of East Tennessee, and she currently serves as the president. And it's an organization that has a suite of K through 12 educational programs that teach the next generation about business, finances, and entrepreneurship. She is also a Tennessee Achieves mentor and LMU Business School executive advisor. If you have not been to her facility up in Clinton, it is fascinating, and I would recommend you doing that. The third recommendation is to expand the availability of angel, private equity, and venture capital funding. That is sponsored and hosted by Eric Dobson. He's the managing partner of Sheltawi Angel Network, formerly Angel Capital Group here in Knoxville. Sheltawi, Eric has spent the last 29 years working in government, entrepreneurship, and venture-style investing, with the last 20 in startup technology ventures. He founded 3 companies, advised dozens, and led investments in 25 companies. Eric's also on our ESB council. He's a council member on our council. The fourth recommendation, which is hosted by Dr. Maha Krishnamurthy, which she's the vice president of UT Research Foundation. That recommendation is to drive greater awareness of the region's entrepreneurial entities with internal and external capital providers. Dr. Krishnamurthy again, like I said, is the vice president of the University of Tennessee Research Foundation at the multi-campus office and manages the operations of the Knoxville office. Her office is responsible for all aspects of the commercialization of technologies developed at UT Knoxville, UT Institute of Agriculture, UT Chattanooga, UT Space Institute, and the Graduate School of Medicine in Knoxville. The Knoxville office also assists various sponsored program offices in negotiating confidentiality and material transfer agreements, and offers educational programs on technology transfer, entrepreneurship, and connecting researchers with local and regional economic development resources. Audience members, before I turn it over to Richard, please post questions you'd like to ask the Chamber, Richard, or panelists in the chat. Nancy will facilitate them after the panel discussion. Thank you all for being here. And Richard, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Nadeem. And why don't we just jump right in? Jade, I'm going to start with you. As one of the cohorts, as a member of the cohort of 100 Knoxville, you used the 5K that each of the members received to hire your first employee. Have you sought further financing to grow your business?
So when I first started my business, I did seek loans, and I started out with my personal bank. So the one that I've been using forever, just because I had history with them. I've already developed a relationship with my bank. However, they told me that I needed to have my business for 2 years before receiving a loan from them. So that was the first roadblock I kind of entered when I wanted to receive capital for Oakwood Avenue. And then I also looked at the PPP loan because that was a really, really big one during the pandemic. However, I started my business during the pandemic, and for the PPP loan, you had to have kind of statistics and numbers and financial data from before the pandemic and then during. And since I started right in the middle of the pandemic, then that loan wasn't really one that I could seek capital from as well. And then I also looked at grants. I applied for a good bit of them, but there were so many, but I did not get any. I'm guessing during the pandemic, it was pretty competitive for grants just because everyone was needing money. And so I did look at those three options. I didn't want to bootstrap or do anything like that. So I decided to use all of my savings to start Oglewood. So it's very, very risky venture. I just threw all my savings in, and that is actually how I started. However, I know that that is probably not the path that everybody who wants to develop a business would want to take. And then after I did that, Brandon Bruce shortly walked into my store and then told me about 100 Knoxville, which I then applied for, and thankfully was one of the first cohorts. So helped me a lot.
Yeah, good that you had your savings. Obviously, faithful that Brandon walked in, and you put the 5K to work. We've got a second cohort underway with 100 Knoxville, trying to help the folks who don't have friend and family money to turn towards savings. And so, how are you thinking about the business in the next 5 years, and what would you like it to look like?
Ooh, okay. There's a lot of ways to grow the business. I love Knoxville, and I would love to expand it to other regions in the South. So ideally in the next 5 years, I would want at least 3 different brick and mortars at 3 different locations. So that would be the first way I would love to expand the business. The second way would just be not being into the business in the day-to-day aspect. So actually hiring a full team. Right now I have 3 to 4 employees with maybe 2 more coming on board. So that's super exciting. And that should free up some time to think about maybe making that second store, maybe freeing up some of my time where I'm not exactly in the day-to-day operations of the business. So that's also another thing I would like to do in 5 years. And then maybe seeing, hypothetically, going into plant consultations, plant education, plant guides. One of the big things I love to do is educate around plants. I love teaching. And so a type of pathway that allows me to teach others about houseplants and the benefits would be something I would love to kind of segue off of in regards to houseplants.
Yeah. No, I love the vision for growth. And, one of the things I learned doing the work for the project was this window of 50K or less in terms of small businesses that are trying to get that growth capital. Any preliminary thoughts? Obviously, you had a few reps in the first time around with the banks and COVID and PPP. Any thoughts on how you might go about getting the growth capital?
So the first thing I think I would do would look up more grants. So now I was educated on, there are some, especially some local Knoxville ones that you can apply for. So that would be the first thing I would do, is to look at local ones here. I would definitely try something other than my own personal bank. There are other banks and other ways to gain capital. That's just not my own personal one. And so looking for banks that kind of specialize in entrepreneurship, specialize in kind of starting a business would probably be something that I would do now. And then just gaining mentors and people who have done this before, people who have had success gaining capital and seeking out their type of advice. I didn't have that in the beginning. Now I do. And so having someone who can navigate the steps on how to do that would probably be something I would look for, which I didn't know 8 months ago.
Yeah, and those are good ideas. Obviously, we'll continue to be a resource for you, but the recommendation lays out a couple of options that when the region and the chamber and the community leaders take them up, I think might present more options on the menu for you. And that's the goal, is to give you all the options that make sense for your business to grow it. And so now that you've been in business for almost a year, you're no longer a rookie. What can you say now that if you wish you knew earlier, or if there's something you might have done differently?
So when I started, I didn't go to business school. I graduated with a microbiology degree. So I kind of dove feet first into the business world. I really didn't have a foundation at all to start, which I would not recommend. So I think just having a foundation, knowing when taxes were due, knowing how to do estimated taxes, getting a CPA super early, having my books in check, all of those things without a foundation is not easy to navigate whenever you kind of start fixing everything. Even having mentors or leaders that kind of help you, or even developing a business plan. I just went head in, and luckily it worked out. I'm super thankful. But even developing a business plan, having a clear path of what you're going to do in 5 years would be something that I would say every entrepreneur needs to think about. Finding ways and sources to keep gaining capital, because in the first year of business, you are probably more in the negative than in the positive when it comes to profits. So even trying to find ways to keep on gaining capital as you grow would be something I think I would have done differently. And then, so having the foundation, and then something that has helped during it while I was navigating was talking to other entrepreneurs that are kind of in similar businesses. That has helped a lot, being like, hey, what's the peak time? What's the slow time? Is this normal? That has helped a lot, gaining insight from just friends, family, and entrepreneurs. And things like this, like looking for, looking for seminars or discussions that you can learn from. Like this would be something beneficial that I would probably try to gain as much as I could before starting a business. I would try to do every panel, or I would try to look at every type of free resource out there that you could learn from.
Yeah, Jade, I mean, that's the mark of a good business owner and founder, is that initiative. And, I joke, but on the one hand, you go to great schools and you learn things in classrooms. And of course, if the things that you've learned there don't line up in the real world, you might or might not be prepared. On the other, you jump in, as you suggested, and you learn things on the ground, and you pivot when your assumptions aren't right. And I would argue that that's as good or better than the classroom, having been there. So to kind of bookend it, what are you thinking about with respect to your peers, and what are the resources you're thinking might be helpful to them, that were helpful to you, or that you wish you had along the way?
So definitely the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center. I went on their website and looked at all of the things that they offer. And I was, my first thought was, dang, I wish I knew this sooner. It was when I looked and saw all of the information. So that would be one. The Black Business Directory is one that I looked at and was thoroughly surprised with. And then probably just, I learned a lot from YouTube, but I could probably learn more from just other, like things like the Knoxville Chamber or the Entrepreneur Center would probably be the two that I would kind of recommend, or now look at further now that I'm kind of in the business.
Yeah, those are great resources. And, obviously, again, 100 Knoxville and the people you've met here in the region are going to continue to be a resource for you. And, now that you're out there, you're going to get unsolicited inbound from people who see the success and want to emulate that. So thank you, Jade. You're going to stay with us. And just for those keeping score, what we were talking about is the first recommendation, which is the need for small is large. So if you're looking at the Capital Access white paper, that's the section that we just wrapped up. So Jade, thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Richard.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next recommendation, which is cultivate and connect your entrepreneurs. And so Callie Archer, who's excited to have back, is gonna we're gonna chat about this. And so, Callie, when we spoke, I have to admit to the audience, not being a parent, I learned a lot about the importance of the youth programs in the region, of which you run Junior Achievement of East Tennessee. Tell us a little bit about the entrepreneurial layer there, which really caught my attention in terms of giving the kids early exposure to these ideas.
Yeah, well, thank you, Richard, for pulling all this together. I love the white paper. Here at Junior Achievement, our mission is literally to inspire and prepare young people to succeed in a global economy. So it really aligns well with what your recommendation was. And we kind of see ourselves as that starting point of the entrepreneurial pipeline. So like Jade was saying, how do you get this initial exposure? So if these kids are exposed in elementary school, middle, and high school to some of these concepts and then some of these resources, the more prepared they're going to be and the more just inspired they're going to be to potentially be an entrepreneur themselves. So again, we just feel like we're helping cultivate and connect those young entrepreneurs. And like Nadeem mentioned, we have what we're probably most known for in the region is our JA BizTown program, which is actually a program designed for fifth graders. And we have a 20,000 square foot mini city, which is where fifth graders come and they get to have their first day on the job.
Yeah,
so it's really, really cool. And so we have about 60% on a normal year, let's say, about 60% of the region's fifth graders come and get to experience that. And so not only do they take on roles as consumers and employees and things like that, we also have the entrepreneurial exchange, which students can take on the role of an entrepreneur and actually get to brainstorm new money-making ventures. They get to do a one-page business plan on our business plan app for kids. And then they actually have to go out and talk to their peers to get investments. So those are just planting a lot of the seeds, even for fifth graders. Once we go into middle and high school, we have 3 key programs that we really utilize. One of them is our flagship program. It's been around the United States since 1919, and it's the JA Company program. It is where high school students literally start, run, and liquidate a company over the course of a semester or a year. It is very in-depth. They have to elect officers. They have to decide on a company name. They have to decide on a product to sell, and then they have to source those products. And so it's really in-depth. They pitch to our investors, which are a lot of our banks, like First Century Bank and Truist, and some of our banks. They pitch to them. They're able to then get a startup loan of up to $500, and so it's real money. It's real bank accounts. It's real customer service experiences. It's all of those things that are just going to help them understand the way business works. So then from that, we also have kind of a step down program that's similar to that, and it's called the JA Pop-Up Shop. And that's more designed for like a quicker experience. We normally give them a product to sell. So we just say, here's your product, whether it's mugs or school spirit lanyards or something like that. Or we give them a product, assign them a product, I should say, and then they have to just kind of take it and run with it and do all the marketing. It's still a great crash course in business and entrepreneurship. And then also it gives them that retail experience, which is what a lot of students, that's kind of their first job is a retail job.
So Callie, let me just ask you. So first of all, I hear, start a company, build a company, liquidate a company. You got, budding either boards of directors or governance players or investment bankers there. So many of those kids probably lined up pretty well for the jobs, the entry-level jobs I had at Goldman. But 60% of the region's fifth graders, how can we make that number higher?
So we are almost maxed out with our facility with that 60%. So we can probably get to almost 70% of our region's fifth graders. But interestingly enough, when the fifth graders come to BizTown, one of their responsibilities as a citizen of our town is to vote. And when they vote, we ask them questions about their experience. And over 50% of those kids continually say that BizTown made them think about being an entrepreneur and owning their own business one day. So again, from a foundational experience, there's nothing else like it. And it just plants a lot of seeds for that.
Well, and the importance of that, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but for those, again, keeping story, this is a section of the report where we kind of overlaid the statistic that we've seen in the region where we've kind of fallen behind with this age cohort in terms of growth. All right, so you can see how if we plant the seeds early enough in kids in the region, many of these kids might decide to stay, start businesses, join startups, or start small businesses of their own. So, the importance of what you're doing cannot be overstated.
Well, thank you. We one quick story I want to tell is we have a mobile, what we call the MBA, and it's a mobile business accelerator, which is our one-of-a-kind, fully customizable Airstream that's a rolling pop-up shop. And so we've utilized that with about 20 student companies this past year. So even during a pandemic, we were able to be really successful and had a lot of great experiences for kids. One of our companies was the AE Runners, which is an Austin East-based startup sock company. And despite their school having a really tough year last year, as we all know, these kids were so focused on making their business a success. So they started their sock company, and they sold out within 30 minutes. They sold $864 worth of socks in under 30 minutes. We were all blown away. It was so exciting. The kids just came alive. The whole school was just cheering them on. It was phenomenal. Since then, they have continued that. It was great. And so since then, they've continued, and they've run multiple other pop-up shop experiences over the course of the summer, because some of these students decided that they wanted to do this as their summer job. So we've continued to facilitate that. So they've fulfilled online orders, and they had some supply chain issues like many small businesses, and shipping issues. So they had to get new suppliers that were US based. And so they ordered samples. And again, these are high school kids, and these are all real life experiences that are going to pay dividends down the line. So to date, they've sold over $3,000 worth of socks. And again, these Marcus Hall of Mark Nelson Denim has been their mentor. And so he's been a great retail and entrepreneur mentor to these students. And just the whole scenario is great. And they're really impressive. And so our goal is just, how do we give more kids that experience? So, not only the 5th grade foundational experience, and then we've got some middle school and high school experiences like this one that are really in depth and just really are going to excite these young entrepreneurs and make them see that they could start up as a career option, and that they could do it here in Knoxville, and they're seeing successes around the region. So it's so exciting.
Yeah, so it might have surprised some people when you set out to answer questions around access to capital. The knee-jerk and obvious response is, more pools of capital, more check writers. But, I think my experience, working with you, talking to you, really cemented in my mind that it's beyond that, right? It's the education piece. And when you read the white paper, you're going to see that's really the second thread. And so, to me, the programs that you're running, East Tennessee, Freedom Schools of East Tennessee, other leaders that are working with youth, we need to expand those programs, and we get into that a little bit of that in the report. What are your thoughts on that, Callie? How can we get more of these schools engaged? I think you and I talked about the challenge in the rural areas, in particular.
Yeah, and I mean, it really just is a capacity question. Like you said, so many people think about, the startup, culture kind of thing starting at high school or after high school and in college, or maybe even after college. When we talk about 5th graders, these 5th graders are less than 10 years from being employees in the community and potentially being able to start their own business. And so it's not really that far-fetched to really start honing in on that. So I think, one of our goals this year is program expansion, and really these innovative and in-depth entrepreneurial experiences is one of our biggest focus areas, because we see when these students, we see the light bulbs going off. We see them having these, confidence building experiences to make them know this is how they can be successful in the free market economy and be contributing members of our society. And so that's really what our programs do for all of our students, I think, is build that confidence. And so we need, more volunteers and more resources to make that happen. The good news is that these programs work. One of my favorite junior achievement statistics is that junior achievement alumni are 2.5 or start businesses at 2.5 times the rate of the general population. Mm-hmm. And they just have a better understanding of how business works. And so again, to Jade's point, it's like, how do we just create this pipeline? And so it's not just one day somebody wakes up and wants to start a business. It's that maybe they've been thinking about this and brainstorming and researching since they were in 5th grade is really our goal.
Yeah, never enough time with you, Callie. Thank you so much for going into that. And obviously, you and I continue to work on these issues. Yeah. And then again, folks, for those following along, it's Cultivating Connect Your Entrepreneurs. That's the second recommendation. See that in the white paper. Callie, thanks again. You're going to stick with us, and we're going to move on to our third recommendation, which is increasing the number of investors and investment opportunities. We've got Eric with us, who is steeped and experienced over decades in the region as an active investor. And so, Eric, when you and I sat down during the pandemic outside, my first recollection is that, being in the business of angel investing for as long as you have, your view was that we kind of need around 100 active angel investors to reliably fill syndicates. And so, talk to that a little bit, and, the type of person who fits the profile as you see it for an angel investor, how we grow that cohort in the Knoxville area.
Wow, that's a lot to cover, but happy to do so. Yeah, I grew up here and then moved away after college and moved back about 14 years ago, and I've been watching this whole ecosystem sort of take root in the 2008 timeframe and really start taking off. Interesting thing. There have been, I think, 6 tech company exits in Knoxville in the last about 4 years. Each one, say, 40 to maybe $90 million exits. And nobody knows that's been happening. So, yeah, things are happening here. That's the good news. But to your point, you asked about how many. We need about 100 organized angels that are willing to hang out a shingle. Okay, take deal flow. Look for it, invite it, take deal flow, perform diligence, and actively invest $10,000 to $50,000 a year. Individually,
in addition to their day job, or how do you think that shakes out?
Yeah, absolutely. Angels, most angels have jobs, and we jokingly say they're Clark Kent jobs versus their Superman jobs. But yeah, most angels are CEOs of their own company, or they are professionals in some way, shape, or form. So I think the good news is what that really creates is about a $2.5 million evergreen pool of capital for launching companies in this area.
It just strikes me, in terms of an AUM target, you think that's a reasonable amount of money to put to work in the region? $2.5 million.
It is. I mean, that's. Let's put it this way. This is the third. I've built 3 different angel syndicates, and I'll talk about that later. But what we've found is that a region the size of Knoxville, the kind of the East Tennessee area, needs about $1.5 to $3 million worth of startup, dedicated startup capital to launch somewhere between 10 and 20 companies a year. And that forms the basis of the need. I mean, of the ecosystem, and then above that, obviously, you got to have some. There's a capital stack there. They have to be able to move on through a continuum. But that's roughly what you need.
Ideally, 50 to 150K check sizes, more or less, 10 to 15 companies a year.
Precisely, that's what you're looking for. And if we talk about syndication. Again, syndicates. That's why syndicates work. If you've got, we've got, one group investing 100 to 150, that's one thing. If you've got 5 or 6 groups investing 100 to 150, suddenly you can put together a significant round of capital for a company and spread the risk. I mean, investors are always looking to share risk with others. So it's that's a normal process.
Yeah. So how are you thinking about, you're kind of on the forefront there in terms of growing the angel community. You're active, probably some near-term events, liquidity events. I know you're probably not at liberty to talk about, so certainly you're active in the region. How do we go about, what are the tactics of growing the number of angels that are active like you are?
Well, let me touch on that for just a second, because I think it's important to talk about the historic numbers before we go on and sort of set the stage for the future. Under our old moniker, the Angel Capital Group, we're now the Sheltowee Angel Network, but the Knoxville chapter itself is now going to be rebranded as the Marble City Angels, and we did that for one very specific reason. We want to have a local ownership and a local engagement with the community that the sort of the national brand model didn't really offer. So we're doing that on purpose. But under our old moniker, we invested roughly just right under $3 million in 8 Knoxville companies. 4 of those are out of business, which is normal for the industry. 2 of those have returned many multiples of our money, very, very attractive returns, exciting returns, actually. And we've got 2 more still going that look like they're going to be really fantastic exits in the next 3, 4, 5 years time frame. So we're actually ahead of the game as if you just look at our Knoxville portfolio. So we're kind of excited about that.
I mean, that either lines up or exceeds.
It exceeds the industry
funds, right?
Yeah, so we're actually doing pretty well. So the good news is it's already happening here. Part of this is we just have to, start telling a better story, tell a more comprehensive story is probably a better way of saying it. Organize this, steer it, grow it. It's already happening here. But I will say one thing, which is very, very, very critical. We've got the Techstars Accelerator coming, and everybody's excited about it. We love the concept. But if we really want to take advantage of that, we must create more local capital. Because what happens is very simple. I see it all over the place. Companies form. If they can't get local capital, they move.
They get plucked away.
They get plucked away. They move to go to capital. And so if we really want to take advantage of that, we have to create a more active investor class in this community. And we've got about 30 angels in the Marble City Angel Group right now. There are some other, obviously there's some other angels organizations, the Lighthouse Fund. I understand there's a group forming inside the university now with the Anderson Center. You've got a lot of investors in this town. We just aren't organized into any kind of a active syndicate. And I hate that word because it has some negative connotations, but it's true. We get together and we, basically look at deals and decide how to invest them as a larger super group rather than just individuals. Yeah. And that's not difficult to do. I've built 3 of these things in my career. It's just you've got to align diligence practices. You've got to have alignment of expectations, and you've got to have active regular meetings of these folks, and we can create, I think, a Knoxville syndicate of the investors if everybody's willing. And obviously that's going to take some of the chamber, that's going to take it's going to take me, it's going to take everybody on this call to help make that happen. But it's something I think we could do. Be a very, very clear, easy step towards creating at least obvious capital in the community where entrepreneurs can go to find access.
Yeah. So it's already happening, and we have successes that we can build on. You and I have talked about this. There's obviously going to be federal monies that can be evaluated for, putting into existing venture programs. And obviously it sounds like we should be doing that, building on those successes. And if we can take advantage of the light that's going to be shown on the asset class when Techstars has their accelerator up and running, I think it just is going to be more, building on more success. And it could get, I don't know if you agree, unlock, any, to the extent that there's any money on the sidelines, angels who are on the fence or other folks who could participate in fund formation or capital formation, Techstars certainly can't hurt, I would think, in terms of shining a light on that.
Yeah, do have one thought on that, and I know we're going to have to move on. I don't want to take up more than my requisite time, but one of the things that we really need to focus on, you're exactly right, is investor education. And I'm already talking to the chamber about how we can create some programs around educating investors. The sad part is great deals don't necessarily precipitate investors to come into the market. Because it's just this isn't taught in business school. You may have seen it on Shark Tank, but most people don't know how to get into it, and they have a healthy fear of investing in very risky startups. So we have to have some education programs around that, and I think with those, I'm absolutely convinced we can grow the angel population here significantly. The other thing I think would be nice to see, we already have an angel group. We've got Lighthouse Fund is a microventure fund. I'd like to see that effort, revived. But I think we need a women's only angel group in town. And I've actually been talking to a lady in Nashville who runs an organization, not for profit, called Women Can Be Angels. And I'd like to bring her to town and do a women's only group session here in Knoxville and just see if there's an appetite for it. I believe there is. But she's an authority on it. She's a fantastic speaker, entrepreneur herself, and an investor. So that's what I think we need in this town in terms of how to enhance what's going on from an angel perspective.
Yeah. Well, look, always great ideas, Eric. And, we'll obviously continue to work together and with others in the region to, to bring about these ideas that you're working on. And so I'm going to thank you and ask you to stick around for a little bit. Folks, this is the third recommendation that Eric and I have been talking about: increase the number of investors and investment in the community, investment opportunities. It's the third of 4 recommendations. And so last but certainly not least, we have Maha Krishnamurthy, who is going to chat with me about making connections. And again, another area that might not have been obvious to folks when you're setting out to, do the spade work on how to improve access to capital. Maha, welcome.
Thanks.
Let's see. Can we? Is your audio okay? Can I hear you? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I saw you're unmuted. It's the wonder of software in the cloud. At any rate, let's talk about an area that you and I have dove in on, which is commercialization. And we have all these assets in the region: Tennessee Valley Authority, Oak Ridge National Lab, and obviously the University of Tennessee. You sit at the center of the commercialization effort and have ideas beyond, let's call it the job description, about how to improve and accelerate that. What are your thoughts on UTRF and promoting commercialization of UT IP?
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great discussion. One of the good things of going last is I can just say, I agree with what Jade said, with what Callie said. I love what you're doing, Callie. And what Eric said, and just let's echo that and go forward, right? That's a great thing of going last. So the thing is that, we sit where my office sits, and what's so exciting is innovations can come from anywhere, because as a university, we have students and it's researchers. And so it really is not limited to the STEM departments. It can come from the arts and the sciences and School of Music. And so it's really, how do you take that and commercialize it? Because quite honestly, me and my team, we're not experts on any topic. And so what we really like to do is to reach out to the customers. And so we typically draft a marketing abstract, try and figure out 20 companies which will we think will benefit from the solution provided. But at the end of the day, we have to ask the customer, is this a problem that you're looking to solve? Is this a solution that you would be interested in? And if yes, what would it take? And do you need more data? And typically it is, we need more data. And sometimes it is, and this is not something we're looking to solve. All of this is great feedback for us to have. And we also, together with the Haslam College and the Anderson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, have the I-Core program, which is a customer discovery program. And while it is really, it's run by NSF, and I'm going to blank out on everyone's names, but it is basically based on talking to the customer, right? Having a hypothesis to why does somebody want this, reaching out, getting feedback. And while it is a university program, it's actually open to the community. And while we like to see it tech-based, as I said, we don't really limit it to, at least within our internal cohort, to a tech-based. But it is really to take the startups and the companies, even people are thinking of doing a company based on their technology, to reach out to a customer and really see what is the true value proposition. It is not what the researcher thinks is a value proposition, but what the end customer thinks is a value proposition. Yeah. And I can go on and on.
Yeah, customer-driven, guiding, customer-driven priorities guiding the research that's ongoing in the university. And so you come to us. Yeah, no doubt. So you come to us with a background and experience on the West Coast, Stanford, if I'm not mistaken. And so, talk to me about the challenges you see in getting and influencing the direction of, once you've got, let's just say, a set of priorities on a particular opportunity, and we're widening the lens beyond just tech. What are the challenges of getting the research, guiding the research to a place where it might actually be commercializable?
So I have to say, I've been here for 20 years. So whatever, has been with Stanford was before that. But the real thing there is that what is around Stanford is the ecosystem. We have entrepreneurs. It's mostly a technology pull in their tech transfer rather than a technology push. You have entrepreneurs going and saying, I really like that idea. I really want to take it and start a business. Or you have pitch competitions where you do have, investors sitting around listening to student pitch competitions and going, all right, this is the one that I would like to invest or I would like to mentor. So the thing, and I do believe that our region can get there, especially if we, all start working together, which we have been doing and do a lot more, is really getting the whole community engaged in taking innovations, in helping entrepreneurs to get to the next step. Because that, to me, really is when startups succeed, when technologies come out at the marketplace is what makes the difference. And has truly been as an immigrant to this country, the difference maker is the startup culture and the entrepreneurial culture and the can-do spirit that differentiates many things about this country.
I wouldn't dismiss 20 years of experience. I think there were a couple of Googlers that might have been.
Yes, they were actually graduate students, and I was a beta tester when it was there, and my kids think I'm a dinosaur because of that. And that is true. They started off in the campus. They actually, and I like telling the story, is because they were actually looking around trying to write a business plan and how to form a business. They started off in a garage. Largely, Stanford tried to market their technology and doing very similar to what our tech transfer does, but they couldn't find, AOL and Microsoft, and everyone said, we don't really need this. And they decided to take the risk. And they were angel investors. The first investors were angel investors who came in and took the risk on these two PhD students who are still on leave from their PhD. And that is, they then invested in it. They were then mentors who came in and helped. And then you had the big VCs who came in and funded. But the initial parts were the angels, the mentors that came in and really saw the potential, actually in these two PhD students and their work, but it's really on them. And there's several such stories. And I'm sure we will have such stories here too.
Yeah. The lore is that Sequoia saw the value in Google, that they even gave them office space and basically didn't let them interact with any other VCs once they came in. So,
yes.
We digress. So, Maha, to bookend it, how do you see? I mean, obviously, you were instrumental in the most recent biotech company well, two things: the San Francisco VC that invested in a company that landed at Spark, and then the royalty kind of discussion around that. How do you see the future and any local companies, and how we could bring the capital and the commercialization initiative together to keep the companies here and help them grow?
Yeah, it is important to keep the companies here. I think the one that you are referring to is the battery technology, correct? That is here in the Spark Incubator Center. And they're not a licensee. I mean, they're a licensee of UT ORNL's technology, and we do have some patents licensed. And that is a great story, right? They license the technology from this region, from the two main IP producing, intellectual property producing research organizations in our area. And quite honestly, the amount of IP we produce is at par with any other place, just because of the amount of research that happens here. And to keep them here at Spark, to give them a location, and then to find, because to make use and leverage the research that is happening here, the students that we have, let's face it, it's a lot cheaper to do a business, to build a business here in Knoxville than it is in California. And there's also a less regulatory overhead, let me just put it in those terms, here than it is back in the Bay Area. Yeah. And so how do we then build that and use those as the flagships to then get more capital to come to this location? And that, to me, truly becomes a couple of things. I think Eric mentioned Techstars, and Techstars is going to be throwing a spotlight in our region. And how do we sort of leverage that to showcase and do more. And that is really important, that as a community, we should be leveraging this big accelerator with 30 startups coming in over 3 years in a whole range of technologies, from big data to cybersecurity, 5G. I mean, the things that will take us is the technologies of the future. That's the name of the accelerator too. So how do we sort of leverage and grow all of that, and leverage investors like Eric and others who are here to help? How do we sort of form that network? At the end of the day, it's like a network effect, right? And then you grow that network and it exponentially starts to grow.
Yeah, I agree. And it's all synergistic. And, the downstream investors, I'm sure Eric will agree, will continually be a challenge. If we get everything right on the early stage and Series A, it just kind of propels down the company life cycle. Well, we've got the right pieces in place.
Mm-hmm. We do.
And, you and I are obviously going to continue to work on these things. And I, thank you for diving in a little bit with me. And for the folks, again, following along, this is the last recommendation, Make Connections, recommendation number 4. And thank you, Maha. I guess our panelists will remain for the closing moments. And I guess I'll return it back to Ms. Neighbors.
Thank you, Richard. We do have a few questions, and here's one that's directed to Eric. What is the minimum dollar value required to be part of an angel investor group?
It's a great question. I wouldn't say there's a quote unquote minimum. I'd say there's a practical minimum. If you're not interested in investing at least $10,000 a year, it's probably cost prohibitive. I mean, so 10 to 20,000 is probably kind of a target zone for most angels when they think about investing in a year. And by the way, you should do this for multiple years. One thing I don't want to see, and I've seen this in the past, and it's a disaster, is someone comes in and says, "Oh, this is great." They invest in 2 or 3 deals, and they say, "Well, I'm going to sit now and wait to see how these do." You're 4 to 5 years away from knowing if you've been successful, and the industry literature all says invest in a bare minimum of 10 companies. So I always tell people, plan on $10,000 to $50,000 a year over 3 to 4 years to make sure you've got 10 to 20 good companies in your portfolio to become a successful angel. So I know that's a complex answer to a simple question, but it's a learned thing. We've learned over time. You need to set a budget and set it for 4 years, 5 years, and engage. It's a lot of fun. One of the things that we don't talk about is how much fun this is. We get to work with exciting companies, exciting technologies, entrepreneurs, just wonderful people. I mean, that's why angels do this. I think is probably as much for the monetary reward. It's just great working with exciting companies.
And here's a question for everyone. We're reading every week the region's exciting plans for Knoxville to become a new Silicon Valley. How is our investors' ecosystem preparing for it and qualifying these companies?
Is that also to me?
Oh, anyone.
Well, yeah, actually, let me address that really quickly, because I'm sure there's some great opinions on this panel too. One of the challenges we have, the Austins, the Bostons, the Silicon Valleys, they have a density of investors, of deal flow, entrepreneurs. They have a density function that we don't have yet. And obviously, that's part of building an ecosystem, is building that kind of density. So, part of the challenge here we have is that we focus, and we get criticized for this as angels. We focus a lot more on, can you run a business, not can you get an idea up and then we'll pile on talent, which is what the big coastal money centers do. So we focus a lot more on, can you run a business, because we want to know that we can introduce you to the next level of capital in our network favorably with the talent that you have here in your local ecosystem. We don't want you to be snatched away. It happens, but so how do we become Silicon Valley? We need a lot more angels. We need, I said 2.5. We'd probably need 10 times that, and and a redoubled focus on the Techstars Accelerator, KEC, Innovation Crossroads. We would have to have a major investment in the creation of both the intellectual property and more and better entrepreneurs. Access to capital and accessing capital are two completely separate things. Understand that. So how companies package their deal is very, very, very important. I will tell you that I think we do diligence better than anybody in the industry, and that's been confirmed by others. I'm a little bit biased, so you can tell me that. I'm fine with that. But we've developed a phenomenal vetting process for these companies. And like I said, we're actually ahead of the game for our Knoxville portfolio. And I forgot we put money into Sparks. So there's 9 companies in our Knoxville companies in our portfolio. So it's already happening. It just needs more people and more press.
Okay. Another question for you, Eric. So how do new businesses connect with private or angel investors?
Yeah, that's another big question. There's a lot of money in this town. There's actually a lot of investors, but they're ad hoc, investors. They're, pass the hat, Friday night groups that don't hang out a shingle and do this. And that's what I'm trying to drive in the town is let's be open and honest, be proud of being angel investors. There's no, this is, I would have thought with Shark Tank, this would become a household sport, but it is a full contact sport. So I understand that it's not as simple as that. But, we put out a website, you can go to the Angel Capital, the old, I guess it's theangelcapitalgroup.com. It's still out there for right now. We're about to change it over we're about to make a big change to that. But, you can apply right on our website for funding. So that's how it ought to be. It ought to be a front door. We go to, demo days. I try and make myself available all over the place. And I'm hoping through the chamber, I can have a bigger reach, to be perfectly candid. Especially with these investor education, seminars. The KEs, go to the Knoxville Entrepreneurship Center. They'll send you to me. Because we're one of the few that are still hanging out a shingle here and investing in
yeah. Companies. So let me just say, folks, PitchBook Venture Monitor Q2 2021, VC volume at an all-time high, VC deal counts at all-time high. There's never going to be, there hasn't been a better time, I would argue, in the history to be looking at startups. Treasury just raining money down on U.S. states and territories. Never been easier to start a business in terms of just testing and getting an MVP up and running. And so the point is, what are we doing to be Silicon Valley? We're not going to be Silicon Valley, but we're going to be building on our own success by doing the things we're doing, acting on the recommendations of the report, doing the things that Eric's mentioning. Growing the cohort of angel investors for sure, and then we'll have the downstream issue of what to do in Series B and the growth rounds. But here's a closing thought. It's pretty widely known that your entry multiples, just think of it as the price you'd pay versus the more mature markets on the coast, tends to be discounted, right? So you don't need to know a whole lot about the technicalities of that. It's just cheaper to buy similar businesses in the outside the 3 major states, New York, Massachusetts, and California. However, many of the exits get marked up to national multiples, right? So it's a little bit of an arbitrage if you think about it. And so if we focus on that, the exits that Eric is talking about, building the businesses that are an extension of our strengths here, then not only will it be strengthening the region and our future entrepreneurs, as we talk about in the report, but they could be, pretty attractive investments that we can build on, right? Because you'd be exiting at a national multiple, entering at a regional multiple, right? So it's just people getting involved, doing the things Eric is mentioning, acting on the recommendations of the report, taking advantage of Treasury's money. Hopefully that gets allocated smartly, and building on the rich assets we already have: UT, Oak Ridge, Tennessee Valley Authority, and the active investors in the region. That would be my closing thought.
Thank you, Richard. We have several more, and they're really great questions in the Q&A, but we're out of time. So we're going to post them when we post the video and get answers from our expert panelists on that. So I unfortunately do need to wrap up this discussion. I want to thank everyone again for attending. Thank you, panelists. and Richard for sharing your expertise and experiences. You've given us insight into each of the Chamber's strategy recommendations. To read the full strategy, go to knoxvillechamber.com. Under Regional Enhancement, select Entrepreneurship Small Business. You can also find my contact information on our site. Feel free to contact me with any questions. Again, thank you for spending time with us this morning, and enjoy the rest of your day.